They owe me money. They owe me money. Although I owe $5,000 for C4. Why do I owe $5,000? Oh, right, that job. Okay, well, hopefully something will come up. Hello, everyone. As you can see, I'm working on the Arsenal's books. We're kind of running into a cash flow problem, just like our federal government. But I'm tish. And so I decided to take a moment to sort of talk about the $1 trillion coin debate. And I'm aware that, fortunately, everyone realized that this was a dumb idea and they're not going to go through with this. But I thought it was a good time to still explain why it's a really dumb idea, because some people just don't know that much, which is fine. You know, that's why I'm here, to tell you everything, because apparently I know everything. Kind of backed myself into a corner with that one. Anyway, so as you probably know, in March, Congress is going to have to debate raising the debt ceiling once again. And what this means, raising the debt ceiling, does not mean the government is borrowing more money. What it means is the government is agreeing to pay back money that they have already borrowed and spent. Which, this is important because if the federal government defaults on its loans, then the government's credit rating goes down again, people don't trust the federal government with its finances, and it leads to a lot of problems. So, it's going to be very difficult because, once again, we have a split Congress with a Republican-dominated House and a Democrat-dominated Senate. So, they're going to have to reach some sort of compromise, although if recent events are any indicator, it's going to be pretty difficult. So, a suggestion that came up to get around this sort of deadlock we have in Congress is to mint a $1 trillion coin. And this relies on an obscure law which gives the Secretary of the Treasury permission to mint commemorative coins in any denomination in platinum. Now, just to explain, we don't use gold and silver coins today, but they are still major collector items. Members of my family are numismatists. I'm a numismatist. I mean, I have just regular coins. I don't have enough money for even silver coins, because a $1 silver coin is $60 from the mint. It's ridiculous. But people buy and collect coins that are cast from gold, silver, and some are cast in platinum. And these coins have a dollar amount assigned to them, such as the silver dollar, as I mentioned, is $1, but it's worth $60 because that's the value of the silver in it. And then you have $50 gold coins and $100 platinum coins, which are worth, almost $2,000 because that's the value of the metal right now. And so they're selling them based on the value of the metal, not on the value that's stamped on the coin. However, if you wanted, you could go to the store, drop a $100 platinum coin on the counter, and you could pay for $100 of groceries. It's technically legal currency, but you'd be stupid to use it because it's obviously worth much more because it's pure platinum. And so what the proposal was that the mint create a $1 trillion platinum coin and then use that as expenses for the federal government and sort of bypass the Congress. And while you technically can do that, it's a bad idea. And historically it's a bad idea because in every time that this has happened in history, it has always had dire effects. Now, to understand, creating new money to pay for your bills is nothing new for governments. They've been doing this since the Roman emperors. And generally what would happen was, in the time of the Roman emperors and European kings, they would gather up all of their coins, which were made out of gold and silver back then, and they would melt down their old coins. And then they would cast new coins and mix them with a cheaper metal, like, say, copper. So let's say you take all your gold coins, melt them down, and make new gold coins, but they're 50% copper. This means you've effectively doubled the amount of currency that you have. So you can pay off all your old debts and have money left over because you've doubled your money through a metallurgical trick. In the short term, this allows the government to pay off their debts. But unfortunately, in the long term, this causes inflation because there's more currency out there, and because there's more currency, it doesn't have as much value, especially because the metal content of the coins has been decreased. And eventually it got to the point where there was no valuable metal in coins at all. They were just, common steel and nickel and other cheap metals. So this is a major problem. Just creating more money never fixes a debt problem. And the most recent example, the most recent and tragic example of this is in Weimar Germany after World War I. Now, Germany obviously lost World War I, and France, who was super pissed off that Germany decided to invade them and dig a bunch of trenches and ruin their countryside, demanded that Germany pay reparations. This was a common practice at the time, where the winning country would demand reparations from the losing country because we won the war. Nah, 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 nah. It's basically France beating up Germany and taking their lunch money. Except, in this case, France beat up Germany and then demanded their lunch money and their dinner money and their breakfast money for the next 50 years. Basically, the goal with the reparations after World War I was to make them so onerous for Germany that Germany could never recover and never invade France again. And so what the Weimar government decided to do was just keep printing more money. And that's what they did. They ran the presses and they printed off piles and piles of Deutschmarks to pay off the German debts. And eventually there was just so much currency that it wasn't worth anything. You had a point where people were papering their houses with German money because it was cheaper than wallpaper. Children were given bundles of German money, paper money, to play with like blocks. And there is a story, which is probably apocryphal, where someone took a wheelbarrow full of cash down to the store to buy a loaf of bread, and they went inside the store, and when they came out, the cash was still there, but the wheelbarrow was gone because the wheelbarrow was worth more than the cash it was holding. People burned it because it was cheaper than firewood. So that's the problem with creating more money, is that it causes inflation, and not just regular inflation. You run the risk of creating hyperinflation, where money rapidly loses its value and wages become worth nothing. Everything costs infinitely more than it did, even a week ago. So I can't say, because I'm not an economist, what just throwing $1 trillion into the economic system of the United States would do, but I have an inkling that it wouldn't be a good idea. So just creating $1 trillion to pay off the government's debts is not a long-term solution to the problem. It's a short-term solution that is going to have serious long-term consequences. And to get the government back on its feet, we need to look at the finances and the cash flow and not just pull money out of nowhere and throw it into the system because we're out of ideas. There has to be a better way, because otherwise we're going to be screwed later on. Now, the other issue that concerns me, and this is not as mentioned as much. I was doing some looking around on the internet. People didn't really mention this argument, but I think it's an important argument nonetheless. Basically, the president would be making money to fund his government. For, my non-American viewers, or my American viewers who don't know how their government works, let me explain. Our federal government is separated into 3 branches. We have the executive, which consists of the president and all of the agencies which make the government work, like the post office, the FBI, the Secret Service, the CIA, the Treasury Department, so the people who make the money, the Justice Department, the FDA, the USDA, all of those federal organizations are run, the president is basically their boss. And so the president runs it in a way that the president is the CEO of the government corporation, if that helps. It's not the best analogy, but it works. Then we have the legislative branch, which is Congress, with the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they're responsible for creating laws, and they're also responsible for funding the government. This is very important because funding is everything for a government. If the executive branch, if the president could just make money out of nowhere, he would be responsible to no one, right? It's like the kings and the Roman emperors. They can just make money and pay their bills, and they don't have to answer to anyone because they have infinite cash. When you are financially reliant upon someone else, that is a check on your power. And this is what the Founding Fathers had in mind. So, the Congress has the ability, and I have the Constitution right here, but the Congress has the ability to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. That is a power given to the Congress. Now, they have established laws which limit the amount of money that the United States Treasury can make. But this applies to paper money, the coins that we use every day, like quarters, nickels, dimes, pennies, and so on, as well as the special silver and gold coins that the mint makes purely for collectors. It does not regulate platinum coins. There is no limit on how many platinum coins the mint can make. However, there probably should be, because that's why it's a $1 trillion platinum coin, not a $1 trillion gold coin. Because if, by giving that power to the president, to just telling him how much money he can make, but leaving that loophole, future presidents, I'm not saying that this will happen, and fortunately the Obama administration has decided not to do this, but if a president did decide to do this, it sets an unfortunate precedent, not president, but it is an unfortunate precedent because it makes the executive branch financially independent of the legislative branch, which is, it destroys the entire balance of power within the United States federal government. So, by removing that check, by removing that limit on the president's power, honestly, we can end up with a dictatorship. And I'm not trying to scare everyone like, those far right and far left pundits tend to do, saying, the country's going to hell, and we got dictatorship, and Hitler, and Stalin, and Marxist, communist, socialist, Nazi. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to explain to you is that we cannot just create more money. First of all, because it's not sound economic policy. And second of all, because it removes any check on the federal government, well, specifically the executive branch, by the legislative branch. That is the most important check the legislative branch has on the executive branch, is the refusal to fund anything by the president. If the president decides to invade Uzbekistan and the Congress disagrees with it, Congress doesn't have to pay the bills for the war. And I don't think soldiers are going to go somewhere if they're not getting paid. Not to impugn their patriotic reasons for serving, but I think soldiers like getting paid. So, if the president, if the Congress refuses to pay the president's bills, that is a check on the president. If the president can just pull money out of thin air and pay the bills, where's the check on his power? So, this is why the $1 trillion coin is not a good idea. Just to summarize, bad economic policy, and it destroys the balance of checks and balances within the federal government. So, I just want you all, hopefully you all learned something today, and I hope you understand why Congress has this sort of power. Even though we get all of these partisan frustrations when it comes to funding everything that we want in the federal government, but this is why it's there. It's to prevent a dictatorship, a tyranny of one person. Because if the president can pay his own bills, then he's basically a king. So that's my thoughts on this. I hope you all learned something. I will be making new videos for February. I will have to get myself on that. And hopefully you will enjoy those when they come out. And remember to check the blog every Thursday for my book reviews. See you then.
There's nothing quite as wonderful as money. There is nothing like a newly minted pound. Everyone must hanker for the butchness of a banker. It's accountancy that makes the world go round. You can keep your Marxist ways, but it's only just a phase. For it's money, money, money makes the world